Well, there are times when truly great historical figures march across the stage of the human race, and we have witnessed that over the last 85 years with a man by the name of Ariel Sharon. He became Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, but was actually more famous for being the most prominent warrior of the modern nation of Israel. And I thought it would be interesting today to go over some of his achievements, some of his successes, and some of his failures, because it's all intertwined with God's plan for the nation of Israel. Ariel Sharon was born in Israel in 1928, not too far from Tel Aviv. His parents had come to the Holy Land from Russia. He was born into a family by the name of Shanirman. However, he changed his name to Sharon. So that was a much more recognizable name. He actually changed his name to Sharon at the urging of David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. His nickname was Eric, and many people actually, toward the end of his career, when he was very revered by many people, actually said Eric, King of Israel. Some people thought that he was the answer to Israel's problems, but of course it did not turn out that way. Let me see if I can give you some of the timeline of his life and some of the high points of his life, and I do welcome your calls on the program today. The number to call is 877-END-TIME to be on the program with me. To reach our operators, 1-800-END-TIME. If you're not a partner yet with Endtime Ministries, please become one. We need you now, because we're not saying to you that the end time is coming. We're saying to you that the end time has arrived. We are living in that time right now. The only question is exactly where we are, and we'll even be talking about some of that today. But let's stop for a moment, because Sharon was born in 1928. At the age of 14, he became a member of the Jewish resistance. Now, this was back before the birth of the State of Israel. This was back during the British Mandate. Let's make sure that we all understand what went on. The Ottoman Empire ruled the area called Palestine, which included Syria, Jordan, what's today Israel, and what's today the West Bank, Gaza. This was all considered Palestine. So the Ottoman Empire ruled it prior to World War I. With the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, this all passed to the control of Great Britain. The British Mandate began, I think, around 1920 or so. The British then tried to control the area. They created Jordan. They created Syria together with the French. But the area called Palestine, nothing had been done with it. Well, after dealing with the area of Palestine, which was an intermingling of Jews and Arabs, after dealing with it for 28 years, Great Britain became weary with it, because they were losing people, and the British people said, come on home. You're dealing with those crazy Jews, those crazy Arabs. Just come on home. So Britain announced that it was withdrawing and was going to turn the mandate for Palestine over to the United Nations. Well, the United Nations then, on November the 29th of 1947, partitioned the land, proposing an Israeli state be created and a Palestinian state be created. Israel was very glad to have a state, even though it did not nearly encompass all the land she had been promised in the Balfour Declaration. Yet she was so happy, after being in exile for 2,000 years, to have a place to call her own, with the assent of the community of the nations, that she quickly assented to the partition of the land. Well, the Arabs didn't want anything to do with it, and they said, no, thank you, we're going to war. So that's what happened in 1947. When the British finally did withdraw on May the 14th of 1948, that's when Israel found herself all isolated, all on their own. The British troops were gone, and so that same night, Israel declared independence. The very next day, the Arabs launched a war in an attempt to annihilate the newborn Jewish state before it could ever get its feet under it. Well, Everybody assumed the Jewish state would be wiped out because there was 42 million Arabs against 600,000 Jews, but it didn't turn out that way. There was a God factor involved, and when the dust cleared a year later, Israel not only had survived, but it actually expanded its borders from those that were proposed by the United Nations. Now, the country of Jordan had come over to fight against Israel. They'd come across the Jordan River, and when the armistice was declared in 1949, Jordan controlled East Jerusalem and between Jerusalem and the Jordan River, the area called biblically Judea and Samaria. Today it's more commonly known as the West Bank. So now all that's a little bit of history. In the meantime, Ariel Sharon, before the Declaration of Independence, was fighting with the Haganah, the Jewish resistance, trying to establish an Israeli state. So he enlisted at the age of 14, which of course would put him about 1942 or so, when he's already fighting. And then by 1945, he graduated from high school and joined the British Jewish police, began covert work for the Haganah. Then, in 1947, he was considered so brilliant and such a leader that he became an instructor. Now, this is when he was 19 years of age, remember. He became an instructor in the Haganah, and he taught police units that were assigned to protect kibbutzim around Palestine. Then, of course, Israel was born as a nation in 1948. In 1952, he was discharged from the army and enrolled in a Hebrew university in Jerusalem to study Middle Eastern history. At that time, he remained a battalion commander in the reserves. Then, in 1953, he returned to the army and he established the elite commando group, Unit 101, which fought with the Jordanians and made retaliatory raids into Jordan. Every time snipers would fire from Jordan into Israel and they would kill Israelis, it was the policy of Israel to counterattack and to retaliate and hit them stronger than they were hit. This was their way of discouraging some of the attacks coming from the Jordanian sector against the nation of Israel. From 1958 to 1967, Sharon's star rose as a military person, so that Sharon was promoted to major, from major to colonel to brigade commander of the Armored Corps to chief of staff of the Southern Command. Israel has a Northern Command, a Southern Command, so by this time he's very high up in the Army. He's a major general of the Army, and he is in command of the Southern Command, which was the command that faced the most powerful enemy that Israel had, Egypt. So he was in very prestigious position by 1967. Well, when Nasser decided that he would order the UN troops out, which were between Israel and Egypt, then he would move his troops into place. Well, the UN left. He told them to leave, and so they left. Then Egypt moved its troops up into place on the southern border of Israel. At that time, Nasser was making speeches. It's time to drive the Zionist entity into the sea. He made a mutual defense pact with Jordan and with Syria. So the handwriting was on the wall. Well, on June the 5th, Israel, not wanting to just sit there and wait until they were totally demolished, Israel flew its planes over the Mediterranean Sea, flying about 500 feet above sea level, and was able to evade the radar of the nation of Egypt, caught the Egyptian Air Force on the ground, destroying at least 90% of Egypt's planes. Well, that's when the war began in full tilt. Over the next 6 days, Israel defeated Egypt, they defeated Jordan, and they defeated Syria. So Israel vanquished all of her enemies in this amazing 6-day war. The world stood stunned. Everybody knew they had just seen an act of God. It was an amazing thing. Well, Ariel Sharon played a very significant role because he commanded the troops that were on the Egyptian front, and he played a tremendously significant role in the 67 war. However, some people thought that Sharon was too independent. He thought for himself, and some people wanted to bring him under control. So under pressure, in 1973, he resigned from the Israeli Defense Forces and retired after 25 years of military life. However, Anwar Sadat had replaced Nasser as the head of Egypt, and he wanted to reverse the effects of the 1967 war because Israel had driven all the way into the Sinai, and also Israel had taken the Temple Mount, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights from Syria in the north. Well, Sadat felt like it was time to restore Arab honor, and the most holy day of Israel's year is Yom Kippur. That's the Day of Atonement. That's when everybody that can goes to synagogue. People who don't go to synagogue any other time of the year go there on that particular day. It's the time of judgment. It's the time when God looks at what you've done the past year, and you're to make amends for it, you're to repent for it, and he will determine what will happen to you in the coming year. Well, that's what Israel was doing when the surprise attack came by Egypt in the south. Most of the soldiers were on holiday. They had to quickly be pulled out of holiday, mobilized, but by that time, Israel was teetering on the brink of disaster. It was so terrible that Moshe Dayan said to Golda Meir, who was the prime minister of Israel at the time, "Golda, I fear for the third temple." That's what they call the modern state of Israel. You got the first temple era under Solomon. You got the second temple era from about 515 BC until 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the second temple. This new birth of the nation of Israel, they call it the third temple. So Moshe Dayan, the famous general with the patch over his eye, said, "Golda, I fear for the third temple." Well, the high-ranking military had forced Sharon out a few months before, but now they knew they needed help. They called him out of retirement and gave him command over the southern front again. And I'll tell you more about that when we get back from this break.